So the follow on another video about mentorship, and I'm trying to keep them short and sweet. These topics are not very complicated. It's a lot of times you just need to have somebody net it out for you. How do you become a mentor? It's actually not hard to be a mentor, and I'm gonna immediately compare it to becoming a Boy Scout or a Scout merit badge counselor. I know scouting is not politically correct; it's passé and everything, but if you want to be a mentor, there's two main hurdles to becoming a mentor. The first one is finding people to mentor, and the second one is organizing what it is that you mentor them in, and that's hard. That's probably the hardest part. So, I mean, usually if you're putting yourself out there saying, "I want to be a mentor and I want to get paid for it," and we should probably talk about that as well. Should I be paid to become a mentor? I mean, it's a separate video, but we'll talk about that third. So, first thing, how do I become a mentor? You just say you're a mentor. That's it. You don't need permission. I mean, this is probably one of the craziest things about humanity that we have incurred upon ourselves is for some reason we think we need permission to teach other people things. And so other people don't feel like they need that permission, but a lot of respectable members of human society are like, no, I can't possibly be a mentor. No, it's bullshit. You can be a mentor. Anybody can be a mentor. You might not like it. You might not want to be around people, but that's the really great thing about being a personal mentor is that you can decide what are the terms. You know, who do I accept? When am I going to be here? And it's funny because over 8 years of doing this on my own, starting a business around it, I over time have come to the conclusion that I don't want to mentor people who want to do web development anymore. I want to just mentor people who want to do this one thing that I enjoy, because at the end of the day, life is short, and I would rather talk with the people that I'm helping about things that I'm excited about. So that's, how do you find those people? Again, go to the meetups. And this is the same thing I said in the other video about how to find a mentor. Go to meetups that are related to your technology. Chances are, if you're either attending in person or you're in the community, the chances are that you're going to bump into people with varying degrees of experience in those meetups, whether they're virtual or real. And naturally speaking, if you just do minimal effort to talk to people and, eat pizza or whatever, and you will find somebody who's like, man, I would love to learn that. And that's your segue. Then you're like, well, I actually, on the side, something I just kind of like to do. I have like 2 or 3 people that I take on as a mentor right now. I have one availability opening. Oh, really? What do you do? How does that work? I say, well, and then you have to know your hours and stuff. And that comes into the second thing. Well, what do you mentor about? So that's all the questions, right? So the first thing, how do you find them? Well, go to the places where there's other people meeting up about the topic, whatever it is. I mean, and that's up to you to figure out. Is it a makerspace? Is it a dentist convention or whatever? And you'll meet those people, and then you can have just natural conversations with them. But then getting organized is kind of the second thing. In terms of organization, you need to know 2 things. You need to know your hours and what you're going to teach or what you're going to mentor in, and what's going to be the order. And you don't have to do that, of course. You can just be there for the person and answer questions, but that doesn't work in my experience. If you're just there to answer questions, you have to have a very, very proactive person that you're mentoring. And I've had them. I've had out of all the people, I would say probably 10% of the hundreds that I've mentored over the time have proactively come to me with so many questions that the hour was filled answering their questions. If you have a true autodidactic learner, that's what's going to happen. Your time as a mentor is super easy. All you do is just answer questions. You review code, answer questions, and let them run the show. And it's important that you let the people that you're mentoring be in control. Now, this, I hadn't planned on talking about this, but this kind of dovetails into a conversation about, well, is this a Mr. Miyagi kind of situation? And I don't think mentoring is the same thing as Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi says, I tell you what to do, you wax on, wax off my cars, and you do it, and you don't give me any shit about it, and you don't ask questions. And I don't particularly think that that's the best mentoring relationship. There have been many, many examples through history, squires and blacksmith apprentices and all this kind of stuff, where that's the way you do things. You shut up and listen and do what you're told, or Jedi Padawan kind of thing. You don't question your superior. You don't question your master, whole master Padawan thing. I don't personally believe that is the same. That's probably a very viable way to learn as well. I think it's more important to do that so that when you have a lot of real discipline, in particular, like a martial art, for example, right? You got to get all the elements of the martial art correct for it to work, and they have to be working in order, and there's a lot of discipline involved. That's not mentorship. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but mentoring is more about letting the person doing the learning control the situation. You are an assistant. You work for them. They pay you, but well, I guess that's right. So you work for them. And your job is to help them chart their path through what it is that they want to learn and help them make their own decisions. You're not making decisions for them. It's super important that you understand that. When you're mentoring, it's easy. I've seen people doing this on Twitch. I've seen a few people who are mentoring, or they have this live stream and they have this kind of like talk downy attitude towards the person that they're doing this with. Well, it's a good thing I didn't tell you to do this, ha ha ha, and they chuckle off, this superiority sort of thing. That is not mentoring. That's maybe close to the guru, the sort of, master apprentice kind of thing, or teacher student kind of thing. And that's not what a mentor is. A mentor is there to guide and help the person doing the learning. So how do you help them do that? Well, first of all, you do a lot of Socratic method. You're like telling them, well, what do you think you should be doing? It makes you sound like one of those silly, new age people, but that's really what it's about. It's like, well, what do you think you should learn? It's like, should you learn the certificate? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you think you should learn the certificate? And you're like, well, and you're just getting them to think about it, and you're playing the idiot. That's what Socrates called it. And you're getting them to answer their own questions. So you're guiding them through the learning, and you're structuring the learning that way. But that's not enough. So the Socratic method, reflective questions about helping them find their way, helping them ask the questions about why they want to do something. You should be really reflecting back a lot of why questions, like why does that interest you? Why do you want to learn Kotlin? What draws you to that? Well, I want to be this and that, right? So that's going to help them make their own discoveries, because that's the role of the mentor. The mentor's role is to help them have aha moments. Aha, oh, right, okay, yeah. That is your pay. More than the money, your pay is being involved with a person who has their own aha moments. And if I could, I would make a montage of every aha moment I've ever had in my life, because those are the payment. It's when somebody says, oh, okay, I got it, or they find a direction in life. They find something that they want, but they discovered it on their own. You just brought them to the point. And they brought themselves to the point, but you just directed their path, and that's your job. Okay, but let's get into specifics. So the reason I brought up the Boy Scout thing, and I only have 16 minutes to finish this video, is because the one thing, the Scouts have done many things poorly, but the one thing that the Scouting program has nailed is mentoring. Because merit badge counselors, I've talked about this before, but I am going to plug it over and over again. I was a Boy Scout leader and a merit badge counselor for years, and I've got to tell you, they have totally nailed how to structure learning in a time-limited environment where a volunteer is involved. So just to give you a summary of how the Scouts work. So what they do is you get a merit badge, and you say you declare that you're going to go for a merit badge as a Scout, and you have to in order to advance, blah blah blah. And so you say, I want this merit badge. So then your leaders say, okay, well, here are 3 or 4 or 10 people that have signed up to be merit badge counselors, and that have all been vetted. They're supposed to be. And these are, people who work in the field. Another thing, they know they're not just random people that are going to teach you electronics. They're people who actually work with electronics every day, or have some sort of serious interest in it that allowed them to be vetted and be approved as a merit badge counselor for electronics. So then what? Then the Scout goes to the person, and under a controlled environment, it's supposed to be, and they they talk about it, and they say, well, why do you want to learn this? Well, they have a sit down with a mentor or the merit badge counselor and say, this is how it goes, and they sign off on their statement, and then they give them a list of requirements, and they have all different kinds of. It's like a skills tree. If you've ever looked at one, we should probably pull one up, but do it on your own time. if you pull up like a merit badge checkoff sheet, to get a certain merit badge, it'll say, do one of the following, do 10 of these. And so there are many options in the learning. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is because the scouts have somehow figured out how to hit the perfect balance between overly structuring a learner as traditional education would do and say, sit there and learn what I tell you, and sending them on their way to do their own explorative learning, the RWX learning, research, writing, exploring, and experimenting, right? So they've hit this really great space because they have this outline, which has got a number on it, like version 1.2 of the merit badge requirements for this and such, because they have thousands of people going through it and they have to ensure they've all done the same thing in order to do advancement and assessment. Now, that's not your goal as a mentor, but the structure is sort of instructive for us to look at, because they have set up this organization and then they've created several paths through the organization of the material that the person can then pick for themselves. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because that's the goal. If you're going to be a mentor, the single thing that's going to keep you like out of like being so overworked and busy is to have that. And you'll see me with the boost. That's what I'm focused on every day, all the time with the boost material, is because I am trying to prepare an outline of those things, because the outline covers the single most important thing a mentor's job is to do, is to help the person know what they don't know, not to teach it to them. You're not there as a mentor to teach them the topic. Sometimes you're there to adjust their technique. Like I'm thinking about Ashtanga yoga or something. You're modifying their technique as an artist or something like that, and that would kind of qualify as instruction. But your main job is not instruction. Your main job is motivation above all, and guidance on what they don't know, telling them what they need to learn that they don't know, and then helping them find the resources to learn those things. So my curriculum was always moving around and stuff, because at SkillStack, my primary responsibility was providing an environment where I had the resources. So when I remember one person needed to learn, they were doing electronics, they wanted to make their own thing, and they needed SolidWorks. So my job as a mentor in a community, which is a larger scope, was to purchase SolidWorks for the community so that anyone exploring that, and that's a very Montessori way of doing it, providing the resources and the guidance and the motivation, getting out of the way and letting the person do the learning and putting all the responsibility on them. So back to the structure. So if you want to be a mentor, to meet people, start, making connections, going to the meetups and stuff like that, and seeing what other people are talking about. 2, start preparing an outline for yourself of the things, and you can write them down in job form. So I don't know if this is the best way, but this is how the scouts do it, and it's also how I've come to do it. When you're writing the outline, of all the stuff that they need to learn, first of all, don't limit yourself too strictly to a specific outline. Just get it down on paper first, and then go back and organize it. And for that, you might want to use the Zettelkasten method, which I'll talk about in another video. So you want to get out all the stuff. You need to sort of flesh out what it is that you want to mentor them in. And if you want structure around it, you can build a structure around it by just listing things down in job list form. Like if somebody was going to have a job doing what you do, or any kind of occupation doing this, what would the job listing look like? Well, can do this and this and this, type 60 words a minute, what I'm saying. So you would put all those things down as a list of requirements, and that is your number one thing of value to the person who's coming to you as a mentor, because you're now giving them what you consider something of a credential. If you do all of these things, I personally would vouch for you having whatever this thing is that I'm mentoring you in. And frankly, I would love to see that codified and have the world start to move to an open credentialing system where it's just a way for us to create merit badge books, with requirements for everything, and just share them. Right. And then one person's list of requirements will be different than another person's, and you can fork it and change it and everything. That's my idea behind an open credential, is just listing down the requirements and multiple paths through those requirements, by the way. And then having those people do those things. And it varies, obviously, very greatly, but depending on the pursuit. If you're doing art, you can say, Okay, you need to do 5 still lifes, and but at some point that is going to be, the that they're going to ask, well, what do you think I should focus on? Well, you're going to need to focus on structure and color first, and color and light, and then you should go off and do this other thing. And so having that order, that you suggest people do those things, that's where your wisdom as a mentor is invaluable to the person coming to you. But they have no idea, and you've learned so much by doing it the wrong way. And there's nothing about a mentor that's unlike the kind of like Karate Kid's relationship with Mr. Miyagi, is that you can have multiple mentors in the same field. So you can have one person that might have 3 mentors, and they might all even be for the same career, but they might be, have a different take on it, obviously. And you meet one mentor, They might have, you could meet a mentor that's going to teach you to do cybersecurity stuff, that's obsessed with Emacs or Python. People are going to have different preferences about what those things are. So going into it, you just know that. All right. So I just want to end with the last story. So of the unknowing mentor that you might end up being at work. So everybody's probably had experience, if you're in the working world, where there's somebody on the team that just seems to get it, and you're kind of drawn to them. And some people will call it meritocracy. They seem to get it, and you feel like if you spend time with them that you will learn. So when you can actively seek to be that person simply by being good at what you do and talking to others. The contrast of that is there was a guy who was actually carted away by the FBI for hacking, eventually from a job that I had at IBM, who refused to share any of his knowledge with anybody else out of fear of scarcity and competitive nature. Like if I tell somebody, if I share what I'm doing, then I'm not going to have a job, or they're going to take what I do and they're going to go do something else. And even though I've had people straight up steal my code, my ideas, and my approaches, and not even mention me, sometimes literally like send an email that was a copy and paste of my stuff. Even though that's happened, I still think being open with everyone will help you become an inadvertent mentor to a lot of people. So if your goal to be a mentor is to make a little money on the side and save the world and help people, that's a different approach from just being a mentor by nature and just being available. And then you'll get, you might not get any payment except for, the LinkedIn referrals or, those really kind messages. Or in my case at IBM, I got a lot of thanks awards from people that said, thank you so much for taking time to explain that to me, because it was during the workday and everything, but I did a lot of, I taught many people Linux for the first time in 2002. So, and so by doing that and sharing of myself, and just being available and open to people that are on my team and being actively interested and good at what I do, because I was obsessed with those things, mostly because I was obsessed, not because I was particularly good, I was able to help them. And the reason I mentioned that is because that's how I learned. It was some other people who were, Joey, I'm going to say him by name, who was very, very kind. Joey, I believe it was Daniel and Skizik Spoondoggle. There are these quintessential Unix guys that I worked with as a clean cut Mormon for this ISP in Portland, Oregon at Teleport. And they were the ones who introduced me to Solaris. And I got to I was just absolutely fascinated with everything they did. I watched everything they were doing all the time. I was always kind of like a little annoying kid watching everything they were doing, but anytime that they would speak, but it was because, Joey in particular would take a moment to talk to me and reflect back to me, because he could tell I was generally interested in what he did as a person, that we didn't have to have a formal mentor relationship. He mentored me just by being open about what it was he did and sharing on the job, little things. And he's the one who told me, you could always use Linux, because I wanted to use Solaris at home. And I was like, no, he goes, you can always use Linux. I didn't know. So he told me about that. And from those little tidbits, I was able to take it and run with it. And so I wanted to conclude on that point that you can become a mentor just inadvertently by being really, really good and interested in what you do and just being open wherever you are. And if you want to formalize it, anything beyond that, then, consider writing down what it is that you do when you know. And that's a task. It's pretty hard to do that because, it's like, well, what do I really know? And what should I learn? But if you do it in kind of an organic form, hopefully you'll eventually arrive at that chart. And then when you're taking on new people more formally, you're meeting them at a meetup and you're like, well, yeah, I have 2 or 3 people. I say, well, what is it that you teach? Boom, and you give them your list, your merit badge book, basically. Then, well, this is the list of things that I think that you should learn, and this is complimentary. Everybody can have that, But if you'd like for me to help evaluate you on these things while you're working through them on your own, I'm available for $50 an hour piano rates, and that's how you're ready. You're ready to go. You can become a mentor. You tweak your mentor list. You take your list of requirements, and every year or month or something, that's what I'm doing with Beginner Boost. You reevaluate and you say, well, I think it's actually really important that you learn Docker this year. Maybe last year it wasn't as important. This year it really is. In 2007, learning Go was irrelevant. In 2014, learning Go was really relevant. And now, in 2021, you must learn Go to do cloud native. So you have to constantly tweak this. And this is one thing the scouts don't do. The scouts have a big problem with this because they cannot. They've printed thousands of these books and they have to revise them. They even have different versions on them. And this is one case where if you are a technologist and you're using GitHub or something, this is why I made my last boost into its own repo so that it has its own tagged version. So if I change something in the order or something, somebody can go back and say, well, yeah, these are the requirements that I did. And that, if you ever want to take it to another level, which is, okay, you want to add a credential of some kind and say, well, okay, you get this merit badge, or you get my certificate, or you get to say that you completed your course with me or your mentorship with me, then you've got that, and you've got the basis of that, and you can then take that to the next level. And that's the most professional version of it, where you can, but start small. You only need 1 or 2 people. Honestly, I started with one person who was recommended to me by a single guy that I met while I was divorced, actually. And I met him at a meetup, and he was just the nicest guy. He was a tech guy in a band, and we hit it off really well. And he mentioned that I was starting to do mentoring on my own to somebody else whose son was looking to do tech things, and he was 13, and that was the first person that I taught Linux to, and so on and so on, and then it just grew. And you can grow it as much as you want, but you can also scale it back as much as you want, which is, right now I'm scaled all the way back to just doing live streams like this. And you can do mentoring live on a live stream too. It's just a little bit harder because it's harder to establish a personal relationship with people. I try really hard, but it is possible. It's not hard to do one-on-one mentoring through video because you can see their screen and you can see what they're doing. It's actually easier to do tech mentoring over the internet than it is to even be sitting in the same room because you can't see their screen. So when I'm doing mentoring, I would watch their screen and do it. So those are some of the techniques. I have 2 minutes left. I used all 25 minutes on this particular video. So those are the methods for how to become a mentor. So, first of all, find a way to meet people through Meetup. Get organized as much as you want to be, including a list of either the primary path or the multiple paths of the things that people need to learn and written in the form of a job description, sort of, and then just getting it out there and circulating it and finding ways to motivate them. That's really it. It's not that complicated.